The autumn leaves crunched silently under Dr. Buck Wild Williams' boots as he tracked the anomaly through the Appalachian wilderness. 20 years of force recon experience, combined with a lifetime of hunting in these mountains, told him something was off. The deer were moving wrong. The birds had strange flight patterns, and there was an almost imperceptible vibration in the air that his grandfather had taught him to feel rather than hear. "Command, this is Williams," he whispered into his neural comm. "Whatever's out here isn't using any cloaking tech we've seen before, but it's definitely here." "Copy that, Buck," came the response from Fort Bragg's new extraterrestrial detection center. "Satellites got nothing." "You sure about this?" Buck smiled, noting how the morning dew had been displaced in a perfect circular pattern about 30 yards ahead. "Same way I'm sure a 10-point buck passed through here 18 minutes ago." Trust the old ways. He'd been tracking the disturbance for 3 hours, following signs that would have been invisible to anyone who hadn't spent their childhood learning to read the forest. His doctoral work in xenobiology had taught him the science of alien life, but it was his father's lessons about hunting that were proving most valuable now. The displacement pattern stopped at a small clearing. Buck knelt, examining a single blade of grass bent at an unusual angle. Pulling out his grandfather's compass, he watched the needle swing wildly. "Found you," he whispered, reaching into his pack for a handful of ash he'd collected from last night's campfire. With a practiced motion he'd learned hunting turkey as a kid, he tossed it into the air, revealing the outline of something massive. "Fascinating," came a voice that seemed to resonate inside his skull. "You tracked us using only primitive observational methods." The air shimmed, and a vessel unlike anything in humanity's database materialized. Its organic curves and iridescent surface reminded Buck of the shell of a beetle he'd once studied. 3 beings emerged, their movements precise and almost mechanical. "High Scholar is ex-Vith of the Galactic Council Survey Team," the tallest announced, its translator converting complex harmonics into English. "We've been observing your planet for 3 days using our most advanced cloaking technology. How did you locate us?" Buck stood slowly, maintaining the relaxed alertness that had kept him alive through 3 tours in hostile territory. "Same way my ancestors tracked deer and mountain lions. You disturb the natural patterns. If you know how to look, everything in nature tells a story." The aliens exchanged glances, their crystalline eyes reflecting the morning sun. "But your species has achieved spaceflight," another said, consulting a device that looked like flowing liquid metal. "Our records indicate most species abandon such primitive skills upon reaching your level of technological advancement." "Maybe that's why they're not around anymore," Buck replied, noting how the aliens maintained perfect geometric spacing between themselves, a defensive formation. "We Americans tend to believe in keeping the old skills sharp. Technology fails. Nature's lessons don't." The third alien stepped forward, its movements suggesting both curiosity and concern. "Our scans indicate you are a scientist, yet you display predatory behaviors. This is unprecedented in our records." Buck's neural comm chirped with an incoming message from command, but he held up a hand, forestalling the burst of questions he knew was coming. Being a predator species shaped everything about us. Our eyes, our endurance, the way we think. Some cultures tried to forget that. Here in America, we decided to remember. The alien's demeanor shifted subtly, a change Buck recognized from years of reading body language in combat zones. It wasn't quite fear, but it was definitely reassessment. "Tell me, Dr. Williams," High Scholar Zexvith said carefully, "how common are these hunting skills among your people?" Buck smiled, thinking of the weekend hunting trips with his daughter. "Common enough that right now, about 500,000 Americans are out in woods just like these, tracking deer with skills passed down through generations. And those are just the ones who got permits for this season." The alien's crystalline eyes widened simultaneously, and Buck knew first contact was about to get very interesting. Special Agent Maddie Cooper stood at the edge of the Kansas survival camp, watching the alien researchers' reaction to what they were witnessing. High Scholar Zexivith's crystalline eyes tracked a group of teenagers as they programmed hunting drones while discussing wind patterns and animal behavior. Scholar Zexivith, Maddie said, gesturing to a 12-year-old girl adjusting a thermal scope. Emily there comes from 6 generations of Montana ranchers. She can track wolves across frozen terrain and write AI algorithms to predict migration patterns. The contradiction disturbs us, Zexivith admitted, their translator struggling to convey the complex harmonics of distress. These children simultaneously embrace primitive violence and advanced technology. It defies evolutionary patterns. Maddie smiled, remembering her own childhood summers at camps like this. Or maybe it's exactly how evolution intended it. Watch this. She keyed her neural comm, bringing up a holographic display of her latest case. 2 weeks ago, we had an interstellar smuggling ring using Centaurian tech to slip through our orbital security. Want to see how we caught them? The aliens clustered around the display as Maddie pulled up her field footage. They had tech you'd recognize: quantum cloaking, gravity manipulation, the works. But they made the same mistake you did. They forgot what they were dealing with. The footage showed Maddie and her team tracking the smugglers through an Arizona desert. She pointed out details: disturbed sand patterns, altered animal behaviors, the subtle electromagnetic signatures that even the best cloaking couldn't quite mask. We combined traditional tracking with thermal imaging and quantum sensors. The smugglers were invisible to our technology alone, but they couldn't hide from skills that predate written language. My grandfather taught me to track deer using these same techniques. One of the younger aliens, Scholar Ven, moved closer to the display. But why maintain such skills? Surely pure technological solutions. A sharp crack interrupted them as Emily successfully hit a moving target at 800 yards, her drone providing wind calculations as she adjusted her grandfather's rifle. Pure technological solutions fail, Maddie said, echoing what Buck Williams had told them days earlier. But this hybrid approach, this is why Americans are the best xenological law enforcement in the solar system. We never forgot how to hunt. The aliens watched as the teenagers transitioned from high-tech drone operations to building fires and setting snares. The casual way they switched between ancient and modern skills seemed to both fascinate and unnerve the observers. There is another matter, Zexivith said carefully, producing a flowing hologram of global statistics. Our surveys show these hunting skills are maintained primarily in your American region. Other human territories have largely abandoned them. Maddie nodded, leading the group toward the camp's advanced training facility. Different cultures made different choices, but here, we believe in keeping our edges sharp. She paused at the facility's entrance. Want to see something really interesting? Inside, advanced combat simulators ran alongside traditional tracking courses. Students moved seamlessly between virtual alien environments and physical terrain, applying ancient hunting wisdom to extraterrestrial scenarios. Yesterday, Maddie continued, these kids tracked a simulated Proximan shadow beast using techniques their ancestors used for mountain lions. 98% success rate. That's better than most advanced military units using pure tech solutions. And this is normal. For American children, Scholar Ven's translator couldn't quite mask their unease. Normal enough. Last year's national youth hunting licenses hit 10 million. Each of those kids knows how to track, hunt, and survive using both old and new ways. Maddie's neural comm pinged with a priority alert. Speaking of which, she pulled up a new hologram showing unusual activity at the edge of the solar system. See that disturbance? Our quantum arrays say it's nothing, but those pattern breaks in the stellar dust. Any decent hunter would recognize those tracks. The aliens studied the display, their posture shifting from academic interest to something approaching concern. High Scholar Zexivith turned to Maddie, crystalline eyes reflecting the hologram's glow. Agent Cooper, your council liaison suggested we observe your hunting seasons. Would you be willing to demonstrate more of these hybrid tracking techniques? Maddie smiled, already noting the telltale signs of whatever was moving out there in the dark. Scholar, I thought you'd never ask. The Wyoming wind howled across the high plains as Jim Hawkeye Henderson led his civilian training group through the gathering dusk. Behind them, the alien delegation watched through their environmental shields as 24 Americans moved with practiced silence despite the harsh conditions. Hold, Jim whispered, dropping to one knee. His students froze instantly, a response drilled into them through countless hours of practice. He pointed to a seemingly empty patch of sky. What do we see? Atmospheric displacement at 320, replied Sarah Mitchell, a school teacher from Texas. Same pattern as a thermal updraft, but there's no heat signature. And, Jim prompted, his weathered face showing the hint of a smile. Movement's too regular, added Mike Reeves, a construction worker who'd been hunting since he could walk. Nature's random. That ain't natural. High Scholar Zexvith shifted uncomfortably as the humans casually dissected the presence of their cloaked observation drone. The council had positioned it there to study the training group, believing their most advanced stealth technology would be undetectable to these primitive training exercises. This is most disturbing, Zexvith transmitted to their colleagues. They're identifying our technology using skills designed to track organic prey. Jim stood, brushing snow from his knee. All right, folks, let's show our visitors what Americans do when we spot something interesting in our sky. What followed left the alien observers in stunned silence. The hunting party split into smaller groups, each taking positions that seemed random but formed a perfect containment pattern. Using nothing more sophisticated than hand signals and owl calls, they coordinated a complex intercept strategy. Notice how they move, Scholar Venn commented, their crystalline eyes tracking the humans' progress. Like pack predators, but with precise tactical awareness. Within 15 minutes, the hunting party had the drone effectively cornered, though it floated 1,000 feet above them. Jim's students had used the terrain, wind patterns, and centuries-old hunting techniques to predict and control its movement options. That's how we tracked that crashed scout ship last week, Jim explained to the aliens afterward, as his students packed up their gear. Same principles my grandfather used to track elk, just applied vertically. Your grandfather. Zexvith's translator harmonics conveyed deep concern. You base modern space defense protocols on knowledge from pre-spaceflight humans. Jim laughed, the sound carrying across the snow-covered plain. Scholar, those pre-spaceflight humans knew more about reading sign than all your quantum sensors. They had to. Their lives depended on it. A priority alert cut through the conversation, causing both humans and aliens to check their respective communications devices. A civilian hunting party in Montana had encountered another crashed alien vessel, this one previously unknown to Earth or Council records. Watch, Jim said quietly as reports flooded in. The local hunters had already secured the crash site, provided first aid to the injured crew, and established a containment perimeter before the first official response teams were even airborne. How? Scholar Venn's translator crackled with confusion. How did they respond so efficiently without central coordination? Because that's what Americans do, Jim replied, already organizing his group for potential deployment. We maintain these skills, practice them, pass them down. Not just for hunting season, but because somewhere deep in our DNA, we remember being apex predators means being ready. The aliens watched as Jim's civilian hunting group transformed seamlessly into an organized response unit. Their primitive hunting gear proved perfectly adaptable for securing an extraterrestrial crash site. The council must be informed, Zexvith declared, their usual academic detachment cracking. These humans, these Americans, they're not maintaining these skills out of primitive ritual. We're staying sharp, Jim finished, checking the traditional compass his father had given him. Because out there in the dark between the stars, there might be other predators. And when we meet them, he smiled, but there was nothing primitive about the intelligence in his eyes. Well, let's just say Americans remember what it means to be the apex. The Wyoming wind carried the sound of owl calls across the plain, his students coordinating their movement using signals older than civilization itself. And in their crystalline eyes, the aliens finally showed what Jim recognized from decades of hunting: the look of prey realizing they were being watched. Marine Colonel Ashley "Ash" Blackwood was teaching her niece how to field dress a turkey when the first reports of the Vorkath attack reached Earth. The Montana morning was crisp, the kind that made the smoke from her family's chimney rise straight up into the crystal-clear sky. "Now remember, Katie," she was saying, "our ancestors learned to use every part." Her neural comm erupted with emergency protocols, projecting classified footage directly into her field of vision. The Zentari colony was burning. The peaceful, herbivorous species had never stood a chance. The Galactic Council's advanced warships, with all their sophisticated technology, hung broken in orbit like discarded toys. "Mom," Katie asked, noticing her aunt's sudden stillness, "what's wrong?" Ash watched the tactical feed with the practiced eye of both a Marine colonel and a lifelong hunter. The Vorkath ships moved in formations she knew intimately, patterns she'd seen wolves use to separate prey from the herd. "Get your father," she told Katie, already linking into the military command network. "Tell him to fire up the quantum comm. They're going to need every hunter we've got for this one." The emergency briefing began 30 minutes later. Her family's ranch house, built by her great-grandfather, now hosted the strangest gathering in its 100-year history. Through quantum projection, military commanders shared space with alien council representatives, their images flickering in the warm light of the stone fireplace. "The Vorkath are unlike any species we've encountered," High Scholar Zixvith's projection explained, their usual academic tone replaced by genuine fear. "They've evolved beyond our understanding of." "They're pack hunters," Ash interrupted, replaying the attack footage. "Look at their ship movements. Classic predator tactics. They're not beyond our understanding. They're just the first predator species you've met besides us." She stood, moving to the tactical display. "See this maneuver? They're using the same technique a wolf pack uses to exhaust larger prey. And here." She pointed to a flanking movement. "That's exactly how mountain lions herd deer toward a cliff edge." The military brass and alien representatives watched in stunned silence as she broke down the Vorkath's supposedly incomprehensible tactics using examples from Earth's predator species. "Colonel Blackwood," General Hayes' projection leaned forward, "you're saying you can predict their movements." "Any experienced hunter could," she replied, thinking of the millions of Americans who would recognize these patterns. "They're sophisticated, yes, but they're following predator instincts as old as time. The Council's ships failed because they were designed by prey species to fight technological battles. But this isn't about technology. It's about the hunt." A new alert flashed. 3 more colonies under attack. The Vorkath were expanding their hunting grounds. "With respect, Colonel," one of the Council military advisors interrupted, "how does your understanding of primitive hunting techniques?" The wall-mounted television, still playing the regular news, suddenly showed footage of the Vorkath's latest attack. Katie, who had stayed quiet in the corner, pointed at the screen. "Look, Aunt Ash, they're herding those ships like we saw those coyotes do to the sheep last spring." Ash smiled grimly as the alien representatives turned to stare at her 11-year-old niece. "That's right, Katie. And what do we do when we spot coyotes hunting our sheep?" "We think like them," Katie replied confidently. "Figure out where they want the sheep to go, then set up our ambush there instead." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. A child, raised in America's hunting traditions, had just casually decoded alien combat tactics that had baffled the Council's best military minds. "They'll target Proxima Centauri next," Ash said, her hunter's instinct reading the pattern. "It's the perfect bottleneck, just like that valley pass where we took down that problem bear last season." She turned to the assembled projections, her expression that of a predator who just spotted prey's weakness. Earth's governments will have to decide their own responses, but I can tell you this: every American hunter knows these patterns. We've spent generations practicing for exactly this kind of fight. We just didn't know it would be in space. The Thanksgiving turkey lay forgotten on the kitchen counter as Earth prepared for war. But as Ash watched Katie confidently explain wolf pack hunting patterns to astonished alien military commanders, she knew humanity had an advantage the Vorkath hadn't counted on. Americans hadn't just maintained their predatory skills, they'd turned their preservation into an art form. And somewhere out there in the darkness between stars, the galaxy's newest apex predators were about to learn what it meant to become prey. Master Chief John Gator Robichok stood in the Pentagon's newly established Cenological Warfare Center, his mud-caked boots leaving Louisiana Bayou dirt on the pristine floor. The wall screens showed real-time footage of Vorkath ships tearing through another Council defense fleet. "Y'all are thinking about this all wrong," he drawled, interrupting a Council tactical expert's complex presentation. The Cajun hunter moved to the central hologram, his calloused hands manipulating the display with surprising grace. "They ain't fighting a war. They're hunting." "Master Chief," General Hayes began, "the Vorkath have technology that—" "Don't matter none," Gator cut in. "Strip away the fancy ships, and you've got apex predators doing what comes natural. Watch." He zoomed in on a Vorkath attack pattern. "See how they're using that nebula? Same way we use the cypress trees to hunt gators. They're not hiding. They're setting up an ambush point." High Scholar Zexvith's crystalline eyes widened as Gator began overlaying alligator hunting patterns onto stellar maps. The similarity was undeniable. "When you hunt gators," Gator continued, pulling up footage from his last hunting trip, "you gotta think like them. They're patient. They're ancient. They'd been perfecting their hunting techniques since before humans walked upright." He grinned. "Kind of like these Vorkath fellows." The room watched as he showed parallel footage. Alligators hunting in the bayou alongside Vorkath ships attacking colonial vessels. The patterns were identical. "Now, how do we catch gators that've gotten too smart for traditional traps?" He pulled out an old, worn notebook, his grandfather's hunting journal. "We use their predatory nature against them. Make them think they're the hunters right up until they realize they're the prey." The assembled military brass and alien representatives leaned forward as Gator sketched out a battle plan based on generations of bayou hunting wisdom. He showed how traditional alligator trapping techniques could be adapted to space warfare, using gravitational wells like underwater channels and asteroid fields like cypress groves. Master Chief Robichok, a Council military advisor's translator, crackled with skepticism. "You're suggesting we base our defense of the galaxy on how you hunt reptiles in swamps?" "Damn straight," Gator replied, unruffled. "Because while y'all were developing bigger guns and fancier shields, we Americans were keeping the old knowledge alive. My people have been hunting gators in the bayou for 300 years. That's 300 years of learning how to outsmart a perfect predator." He brought up a new tactical display, this one showing his proposed deployment of Earth's combined fleet. The formation looked chaotic at first, but then the pattern emerged. It was exactly how Cajun hunters would set up to trap a particularly clever alligator. "The Vorkath think they're the galaxy's apex predators," Gator said, his voice taking on the rhythmic quality of a born storyteller. "But they ain't never met anyone who learned to hunt like we did, not just with technology, but with every lesson nature ever taught us." As if to punctuate his point, his neural comm pinged with an update from home. The hunting party he'd trained last summer had just successfully tracked and contained another Vorkath scout ship using nothing but traditional bayou hunting techniques adapted for space. "See," he showed the footage proudly. "Those are just regular folks, teachers, mechanics, shopkeepers. But they all grew up learning to hunt in the bayou. They all know how to think like a predator." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. America didn't just have a military response to the Vorkath. They had millions of civilians who instinctively understood the enemy's hunting patterns. Master Chief, General Hayes said slowly, how quickly can you train our space fleet in these hunting techniques? Gator smiled, thinking of countless nights in the bayou, learning the ways of predator and prey. Sir, give me 2 weeks with your pilots. By the time I'm done, they'll be thinking like true bayou hunters. His eyes gleamed with predatory intelligence. And then we'll show these Vorkath what happens when you hunt in American waters. The council representatives exchanged worried glances as Gator began outlining his training program. They had worried humans were too predatory. Now they were counting on that very nature to save the galaxy. Major Lisa Timberwolf watched her neural display as 15 Earth ships moved silently through the Arcturus sector. Her Apache grandfather's teachings guided every decision, even here among the stars. Remember the pack, she sub-vocalized to her fleet. Move like shadows, think like wolves. Her crews had spent 2 weeks learning traditional Native American hunting techniques, and now those ancient lessons were about to be tested against the galaxy's newest apex predators. Contact, her sensor officer whispered. Vorkath battle group, moving just like you said they would, Major. Lisa smiled. Her grandfather would have recognized the pattern instantly. It was the same formation wolf packs used when hunting elk in the Rockies. The Vorkath were setting up a classic funnel maneuver. Time to show them what real pack hunters can do, she transmitted. Execute Operation Ghost Dance. Her ships split apart, each crew moving with the practiced precision of hunters who'd rehearsed their roles countless times. The maneuver looked chaotic to the observing council vessels, but Lisa saw the perfect order in it. The same deadly grace she'd learned tracking wolf packs through winter forests. Major, High Scholar Zexvith's voice came through on the command channel. Your ships appear to be scattered. The Vorkath will. Watch, Lisa interrupted softly. This is how my ancestors hunted before we had rifles or neural nets. This is how the wolf people learned to think. The Vorkath took the bait, their ships accelerating toward what they perceived as scattered prey. But Lisa's fleet was anything but scattered. Each vessel had positioned itself exactly where ancient hunters would have stood to turn the tables on a wolf pack. Now, she commanded, show them what Apache hunters can do. Her ships emerged from their hiding spots in the stellar debris, using gravitational eddies like her ancestors had used wind currents. The Vorkath found themselves in exactly the same position as countless wolf packs that had thought they were hunting, only to discover they were being hunted. Major Wolf, one of the council observers, transmitted, your ships are using the stellar phenomena like terrain, Lisa finished. That dust cloud. That's our high ground. That radiation belt. That's our river crossing. The principles haven't changed since my people first learned to hunt on the plains. The Vorkath realized their predicament too late. Lisa's fleet had them surrounded, using a technique perfected by plains tribes thousands of years ago. Each attempted escape route had been anticipated, each tactical option countered by ancient hunting wisdom adapted to space warfare. My grandfather told me, Lisa transmitted on an open channel, knowing the Vorkath would hear, that the greatest hunters respect their prey. But they never forget what it means to be the apex predator. The battle that followed was unlike anything the council had ever witnessed. Lisa's ships moved with the coordinated grace of a wolf pack that had hunted together for years, anticipating each other's moves without need for constant communication. The Vorkath found their every predatory instinct turned against them by hunters who had learned from Earth's original apex predators. How? Scholar Van asked afterward, as Lisa's fleet regrouped around the debris of the Vorkath ships. How did you predict their every move? Lisa pulled up an old hologram, her grandfather teaching her to track wolves through the snow, because every predator follows patterns written into their DNA. The Vorkath think they invented space combat, but Earth's predators perfected these hunting techniques millions of years ago. We Americans just had the wisdom to keep studying them. She switched the display to show her fleet's formation. See this pattern? It's exactly how wolves hunt when they need to take down something bigger than themselves. The Vorkath never stood a chance. They were using tactics my ancestors decoded before we had written language. As her ships secured the sector, Lisa received a transmission from Earth. More hunting parties were being assembled, each led by Americans who understood predator psychology at a bone-deep level. The galaxy was about to learn why humans, especially Americans, had remained apex predators even into the space age. "My grandfather would be proud," she whispered, watching her fleet move into their next hunting formation. "We remembered the old ways. And now, they're going to save the galaxy." Texas Game Warden Jake Longhorn Martinez stood on the bridge of the U.S. Alamo, watching his neural display as the largest coordinated hunting operation in human history unfolded across 3 star systems. What had started as a desperate defense had evolved into something the galaxy had never seen, a proper American-style hunting party, but on a cosmic scale. "You'll remember what I taught you about deer drives back home," he transmitted to the assembled fleet commanders. "Same principles apply here. Even the smartest buck falls for patterns older than time itself." His neural net filled with acknowledgments from an unprecedented coalition of civilian hunters and military personnel. Each ship captain had been personally selected based on their hunting experience rather than their academic credentials. "Vorkath main fleet detected," his sensors officer reported, "moving exactly as predicted. They're following the stellar currents like game trails." Jake nodded, recognizing the behavior instantly. He'd seen it countless times during Texas's hunting seasons, watching how deer would naturally flow through the landscape. The Vorkath, for all their advanced technology, were following the same instinctive patterns. "Execute Operation Brush Country," he ordered, using techniques refined through generations of Texas hunting parties. His fleet broke into smaller groups, each understanding their role as clearly as weekend hunters working a property back home. The Council observation ships watched in amazement as the seemingly scattered Earth vessels moved with perfect coordination. No constant communication was needed. Every ship captain understood their part in the hunt through years of practical experience. "Mr. Martinez," High Scholar Zixvith's voice carried clear confusion. "Your forces appear to be mimicking techniques used in primitive terrestrial hunting rituals." Jake smiled, adjusting his position based on instincts honed by decades in the field. "Scholar, there's nothing primitive about what we're doing. We're applying millions of years of predator-prey evolution to space combat. Watch this." He transmitted a split screen to the Council ships, one side showing traditional Texas deer hunting formations, the other showing his current fleet positions. The patterns were identical. "In Texas," he explained while his ships maneuvered, "we learned that the most sophisticated prey animals still follow ancient instincts. The Vorkath ain't different. They're just better armed." The Vorkath fleet, confident in their superior technology, moved precisely where Jake's lifetime of hunting experience told him they would. They were responding to pressures and opportunities laid out with the same care he used to position hunters during deer season. "Now," he transmitted, "show 'em what Texas hunters can do." His fleet sprung the trap with devastating effectiveness. Ships emerged from hidden positions like hunters rising from carefully placed blinds. The Vorkath found their retreat routes cut off by maneuvers that would have been familiar to any experienced deer hunter. "See that formation they're trying?" Jake highlighted a Vorkath defensive pattern. "Same thing a cornered buck does, looking for the weak spot in the drive line. That's why we positioned the Anderson family ships right there. 5 generations of Texas hunters don't leave gaps." The battle unfolded like a perfectly executed hunt, with each ship playing its role in a dance as old as predation itself. The Vorkath's increasingly desperate attempts to break free were met with counters born from countless seasons in the field. "Your hunting skills," Scholar Venn observed with growing respect, "they translate perfectly to space warfare." "That's because we never forgot what we are," Jake replied, watching as his fleet closed the final noose. "Back home, we don't just hunt during season. We study, we teach, we pass it down. Every weekend hunter in Texas knows these patterns better than they know their own names." The Vorkath flagship, finally recognizing the skill of their opponents, attempted to communicate. Jake's response was pure Texas. "Y'all wandered into the wrong hunting grounds," he transmitted. "Should have checked the season dates and permit requirements." As the last Vorkath ships were corralled into submission, Jake received updates from across human space. More hunting parties were being organized, with Americans teaching their techniques to allied species. The galaxy was learning that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology. It was their refusal to forget their predatory heritage. Like my daddy always said, Jake transmitted to his victorious fleet, "Ain't nothing more dangerous than a Texan during hunting season, 'cept maybe a Texan hunting in space." The Montana sunset painted Buck Williams' ranch house in shades of gold as the most unusual victory celebration in human history got underway. Hunters turned space warriors gathered around fire pits, sharing stories that bridged the gap between ancient skills and cosmic warfare. To the American hunter, Dr. Buck raised his glass, surrounded by the team that had changed the course of galactic history. Who knew our weekend hobbies would save the galaxy? Around him sat the unlikely heroes. Maddie Cooper, fresh from teaching council species about tracking. Jim Henderson discussing ambush techniques with alien military advisors. Colonel Ash Blackwood showing her niece Katie how to identify predator patterns in stellar phenomena. Gator Robichaud demonstrating Bayou hunting wisdom to fascinated xenobiologists. Lisa Timberwolf explaining pack dynamics to council strategists. And Jake Martinez sketching hunting drives in the star charts. High Scholar Zexvith stood before the gathering, their crystalline eyes reflecting the campfire's flames. "The council must formally acknowledge its error," they announced. "We once viewed humanities, particularly Americans, maintenance of hunting skills as primitive. We now understand it was wisdom beyond our comprehension." "Wasn't wisdom," Gator corrected, showing a group of alien officers his grandfather's old hunting journal. "Was just Americans being too stubborn to forget who we are." "That's the point," Maddie added, pulling up a hologram of her latest training class, now filled with both human and alien students. "We didn't just preserve these skills. We kept evolving them, adapting them, passing them down while adding new layers of understanding." The display shifted to show footage from the final battles. Council observers watched in renewed amazement as human hunters applied their skills across the cosmos. Louisiana Bayou techniques trapping Vorkath ships in gravitational swamps, a patch hunting wisdom turning stellar phenomena into natural ambush points. Texas deer drive tactics coordinating massive fleet operations. "We're establishing a new classification," Scholar Venn announced. "Humanity will be registered as Advanced Persistent Predators, with special recognition of American hunting traditions." More importantly, Ash added, watching Katie teach young aliens how to read predator movement patterns, "We're teaching others to remember their own predatory heritage. Every species started somewhere. We just never forgot where we came from." Buck walked to the edge of his property, where his great-grandfather had first taught his family to track. The galaxy spread out above him, no longer a mystery but a new hunting ground where ancient wisdom had proven more valuable than advanced technology. "You know what really won this war?" Lisa asked, joining him. "It wasn't just the hunting skills, it was how we passed them down. Every weekend hunter, every family tradition, every kid learning tracking from their grandparents. We kept the knowledge alive because it meant something to us." Jake nodded, adding, "And now look." He gestured to where council military officers were eagerly learning tracking basics from civilian hunting instructors. The galaxy's finally catching up to what Americans knew all along. You don't abandon your roots just because you've got fancy new toys. The celebration continued into the night, but it was more than just a victory party. It was a teaching moment, with each American hunter sharing their unique regional wisdom. Gator's Bayou hunting stories, Lisa's wolf pack studies, Jake's deer drive strategies, all being eagerly absorbed by the galaxy's next generation of defenders. To think, High Scholar Zexvith mused, watching Katie confidently explain predator behavior to alien military cadets. "We once feared these skills made humanity dangerous." "Oh, they do," Buck smiled, his predator's eyes reflecting the starlight. But sometimes, the galaxy needs dangerous people who remember the old ways. Sometimes being dangerous is exactly what makes you civilized. As the night drew to a close, the gathered humans and aliens looked up at the stars with new understanding. Humanity had proven itself not just as a spacefaring species, but as the guardians of knowledge older than civilization itself. The Americans hadn't just preserved their hunting heritage, they turned it into humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. After all, Buck concluded, watching the next generation of human and alien hunters learning together, the best predators don't just survive, they teach.